Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The old bookstore in Hyde Park smelled like aged paper and dreams, its shelves groaning under the weight of countless stories. Rain battered the windows, a Chicago storm turning the streets outside into rivers, but inside, it was warm, the air thick with the hum of jazz from a radio in the corner. I stood by a rack of poetry, my fingers tracing the spine of a worn Langston Hughes collection, my heart pounding like I was 20 again, waiting for her to walk through a library door. Zora Mitchell was here, just a few feet away, her curls loose under a red scarf, her eyes scanning a shelf of novels. She didn't know I was watching, didn't know I'd been watching her for weeks, ever since I found her again in that diner. But tonight, something had shifted, like the storm was daring us to face the truth. "Find anything good?" I asked, my voice low, stepping closer. She turned, her eyes meeting mine, and I swear the world stopped. Those eyes, warm brown with flecks of amber, like a sunset I'd spent 20 years chasing, held me captive, just like they had back in college. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but enough to make my pulse race. "Maybe," she said, holding up a book, her voice soft but sharp, like she was testing me. "Depends on what I'm looking for." I moved closer, the space between us shrinking, the rain a steady drumbeat outside. "What are you looking for, Zora?" I asked, my voice rougher than I meant, her name a prayer I hadn't spoken in years. She froze, her breath catching, and I saw it. A flicker of something, not recognition exactly, but a spark, like a memory buried deep. The lights flickered, the storm messing with the power, and the bookstore dimmed, the jazz fading to a hum. We were alone now, the other customers gone, the clerk somewhere in the back. I reached for the Hughes book in her hand, my fingers brushing hers, and the touch was fire, a jolt that sent my heart into overdrive. Her skin was warm, her scar, a faint line on her wrist from a college mishap, still there, a map to a past we'd lost. "Marcus," she whispered, my name slipping out like a secret she didn't know she knew. Her eyes searched mine, confusion and want swirling in them, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I stepped closer, my hand finding her shoulder, my thumb grazing the soft skin above her collarbone. She didn't pull away, her breath quickening, her body leaning into mine like it remembered what her mind couldn't. "You feel it, don't you?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the rain roaring outside. "Us. What we were." Her lips parted, and I saw the storm in her eyes. Fear, longing, 1,000 questions she couldn't ask. I leaned in, my forehead nearly touching hers, the air thick with the scent of her lavender lotion and the old books around us. And then it happened. A kiss, slow at first, like we were learning each other again, then deep, hungry, a release of 20 years of regret. Her lips were soft, tasting of coffee and rain, and she melted into me, her hands gripping my shirt, a soft moan escaping her throat, aping. My fingers tangled in her curls, her body pressed against mine, and for a moment, it was like we'd never been apart, like the world hadn't torn us to pieces. But then thunder cracked, loud enough to shake the walls, and she pulled back, gasping, her eyes wide with panic. "I can't," she said, her voice trembling, her hands pushing against my chest. "I don't know what this is, Marcus, but I can't. But I—" She grabbed her book and ran, her red scarf trailing like a flag, leaving me standing there, my lips still tingling, my heart a wreck. The rain poured outside, the bookstore empty, and I sank onto a stool, the Hughes book clutched in my hands. I'd found her again, after 2 decades of searching, but she was running, scared of a truth I'd barely begun to unravel, And somewhere, in the shadows of my past, my family's secrets were waiting to pull us apart again. Let me take you back. Because this isn't just about a kiss in a storm. It's about love that burns through time. About a man who traded his heart for a fortune, and a woman who built a life from ashes. My name's Marcus Caldwell, and the business pages call me the king of Chicago's financial world, the CEO of Caldwell Ventures, a company I turned from my grandfather's crumbling empire into a global powerhouse. I've got a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a garage full of cars I barely drive, and a bank account that could buy half the city. But none of it means a damn thing when I wake up every morning to silence, the kind that screams louder than any deal I've closed. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, a kid caught between worlds. My mom, Lila, a socialite with big plans, and my dad, a quiet man who just wanted peace. Lila raised me to believe success was a name, a legacy, the kind of life that came with private schools and country clubs. But I was never comfortable in that world, not until I got to college on a scholarship, free from her shadow. That's where I met Zora Mitchell, the woman who made me believe I could be more than my last name. It was a crisp fall evening at Westlake University in Evanston, the library a haven from the rich kids who ruled campus. I was buried in an economics textbook, stressed about midterms, when she sat across from me, her curls wild, her eyes sharp with focus. "You stuck on that problem set too?" she asked, her voice warm, a Memphis lilt that felt like home. I looked up, ready to brush her off, but her smile stopped me cold, bright, real, like she saw me, not the heir to a fortune. We stayed till the library kicked us out, then moved to a 24-hour diner, swapping notes and stories over greasy fries. By sunrise, I knew I'd met someone who'd change me. Zora was from a working-class family, her mom a nurse who'd worked doubles to send her to college. She was brilliant, studying business with a fire to make a difference, not just a paycheck. She didn't care about my family's money, didn't flinch at their expectations. She saw the awkward kid beneath the pressure, the one who wanted to build something real. For 2 years, we were everything. We'd skip frat parties to hit jazz clubs in Bronzeville, swaying to Billie Holiday under dim lights, her body warm against mine, her curls brushing my cheek. We'd spend hours in used bookstores, arguing over poetry, her laugh making the world brighter. I taught her to love Vivaldi. She taught me to hear the soul in Coltrane. We planned a future, grad school, a business together, a life where love trumped legacy. I bought a ring, a simple sapphire, saving every penny from my part-time job, dreaming of the day I'd ask her to be mine. But my family had other plans. Lila invited Zora to our estate for dinner, a test she was never meant to pass. I still see my mom's face, her smile tight, her eyes cold as she sized Zora up. "She's charming," Lila said later, her voice dripping with disdain. "But she's not our kind, Marcus. You have a legacy to uphold." My grandfather was blunter, his ultimatum clear: choose Zora, and I'd lose everything: money, family, the company I was groomed to lead. Choose the Caldwell name, and I'd have the world. I told myself I was being practical, that I could do more good with power than without, that love was a dream I couldn't afford. I met Zora by Lake Michigan, the wind sharp, and broke her heart. "This can't work," I said, my voice hollow, unable to meet her eyes. "My family, they expect things." She stood tall, her curls whipping in the breeze, and said, "Look at me and say it again." I couldn't, but I walked away, leaving her on that shore, my heart shattering with every step. 20 years later, I'm a stranger to myself. My mornings are a machine. Wake up alone, hit the gym, eat breakfast prepped by my chef, then head to Caldwell Ventures Tower in the Loop. My assistant, Malik Hayes, schedules my life in 10-minute blocks. Meetings, calls, galas where I smile for cameras and shake hands with people I don't trust. Forbes calls me the city's most eligible bachelor, but they don't see the hollow man staring out at Lake Michigan, wondering where it all went wrong. Everything changed a month ago when I slipped away from a meeting, craving something real. I found Soul Haven, a diner a few blocks from my hotel, its neon sign flickering, its booths worn but welcoming. I slid into a seat, loosening my tie, and ordered coffee without looking up. Then I heard her voice, warm, steady, like a song I'd never forgotten. I glanced up, and there she was, Zora, pouring coffee, her hair shorter, silver strands catching the light, her eyes still holding that sunset glow. She called herself Nora, didn't recognize me, her smile polite but distant, like I was just another customer. I left a tip too big in my hotel info, hoping she'd reach out. She didn't, but I went back, night after night, watching her move between tables, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the weariness in her steps. I learned she had a daughter, Nia, a pre-med student at Northwestern, and a life built on grit, not gold. I saw the scar on her wrist, the same one from a fall during a college hike, and knew it was her, my Zora, the love I'd traded for a legacy that felt like chains. I called Malik that night, my voice shaking. "I found her," I said, pacing my penthouse, the city lights mocking me. "Zora. She's here in Chicago, working at a diner, but she doesn't know me." Malik, always the voice of reason, leaned back in his South Side apartment, jazz playing low. "You sure you're not chasing a ghost, boss?" he asked, his locks swaying. "What if she's moved on? You gonna upend her life for a memory?" "I don't know," I admitted, the sapphire ring heavy in my pocket, a relic I'd kept through every move, every deal. "But I have to try. She deserves to know I never stopped loving her." Malik sighed, his voice gentle but firm. "Love ain't about rewriting the past, Marcus. It's about showing up for the present. Tread careful, man. You're playing with fire." He was right, but I couldn't stop. I'd spent 2 decades building an empire, but Zora was the only thing that ever felt like home. That kiss in the bookstore, that moment when her lips met mine, was proof. Proof that what we had was still alive, buried but burning. I stood outside now, the rain soaking my coat, the Hughes book clutched to my chest, its pages damp. I'd hurt her once, walked away when she needed me most, but I wasn't that kid anymore, and I'd fight like hell to prove it, even if it meant facing my family's secrets, her daughter's distrust, and the truth I'd been too scared to see. If you've ever lost a love that still haunts you, or fought for a second chance that felt impossible, stick with this story. It's for anyone who's carried a regret too heavy to name, who's dreamed of seeing someone again and saying the things you never got to say. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about a time you took a risk for someone who mattered. Your heart's gonna thank you for sharing. Trust me, this journey's worth every step, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The Chicago Loop was a machine, all glass towers and hurried footsteps, the kind of place where deals were made and dreams were bought. I sat in the back of my chauffeured SUV, my tie loosened, my phone buzzing with emails I didn't care about. Another day, another 8-figure contract signed, another notch on the belt of Marcus Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Ventures. But the victory felt hollow, like every other win in the past 20 years. My penthouse was waiting, its Lake Michigan view as cold as the silence that filled it. I needed air, something real, something that wasn't polished to death. "Pull over," I told my driver, spotting a neon sign a few blocks from the hotel. "Soul Haven," it read, the letters flickering like they'd seen better days. It was a diner, nothing fancy, just the kind of place where nobody cared about my net worth or my Patek Philippe watch. I stepped out, the city's hum fading as I pushed open the door, a bell jingling above me. The air smelled of coffee and fried chicken, the booths worn but clean, the jukebox playing a low, soulful tune. It was mid-afternoon, that quiet stretch between lunch and dinner, only a couple of tables occupied. I slid into a booth by the window, loosening my tie, and grabbed a laminated menu, its edges curled, a coffee stain marking the specials. For the first time all day, I could breathe. "Coffee to start?" a voice asked, warm and steady, like a melody I'd heard in a dream. I didn't look up, distracted by a text from Malik, my assistant, about tomorrow's schedule. "Black, please," I said, my voice automatic, my eyes still on the screen. She set the mug down, her hand brushing the table, and something about it, the slender fingers, the faint scar on her wrist, made me pause. I glanced up to thank her, and the world stopped spinning. Zora Mitchell. My Zora, though she called herself Nora now. Her curls were shorter, silver strands weaving through the black, her face etched with fine lines that spoke of laughter and struggle, but those eyes, warm brown with amber flecks, like a sunset over Memphis, were unmistakable. The same eyes that had looked at me with love, then heartbreak, 2 decades ago. I froze, the coffee mug halfway to my lips, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. She didn't notice my shock, already turning to greet an older couple at another table, her smile polite but tired, like she'd been carrying the world too long. I watched her move, efficient but graceful, refilling cups, wiping down counters, her red apron tied tight around her waist. She was different, older, wearier, but she was Zora, the woman I'd loved, the one I'd walked away from when my family demanded I choose their legacy over her. I'd changed, too. The scrawny college kid was gone, replaced by a polished executive, my lanky frame filled out, my hair cropped short with gray at the temples. I ditched the glasses for laser surgery, changed my name from Marcus Langston to Caldwell when I took over the family business, a condition my grandfather set to erase my father's weakness. No wonder she didn't recognize me. But I knew her, would have known her anywhere, from the scar on her wrist to the way she hummed a Billie Holiday tune when she thought no one was listening. I ordered the special, fried catfish and cornbread, I think, barely able to speak, my eyes locked on her face, searching for a flicker of recognition. There was none, just the practiced smile of a waitress who'd been on her feet too long. "Coming right up," she said, taking my menu, her voice a knife to my chest. She walked away, and I sat there, paralyzed, the ghost of our past sitting across from me like an uninvited guest. The diner was a microcosm of Chicago, regulars chatting, a truck driver nursing a coffee, a kid doing homework in the corner. But all I saw was Zora, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the weight in her steps. I overheard a customer, some suit in a Rolex, mutter to his buddy as she passed, "She's just the help, man. Probably can't even spell MBA." My jaw clenched, my hands curling into fists under the table. I wanted to stand, tell him Zora was smarter than he'd ever be, that she'd taught me what it meant to fight for something real. But I didn't. I'd learned long ago that guys like him didn't care about the truth, only the lies they told themselves. Still, it burned, a reminder of the world that had looked at her, at my mom's nurse friends, at every black woman who dared to dream and seen less and seen. She brought my plate, the cornbread steaming, the catfish golden, and I managed a "thanks," my voice rough. Her eyes met mine for a second, curious, maybe, but nothing more. "Enjoy," she said, and moved on, leaving me with a plate I barely touched and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. I thought of our college days, the nights we'd spent in Bronzeville jazz clubs, her body swaying against mine, her laugh warm in my ear. I thought of the lakefront, where I'd broken her heart, my cowardice a wound that never healed. And now she was here, serving coffee, living a life I'd had no part in, while I sat on a fortune built on the ashes of what we'd been. I left a tip that was probably too much, scribbling my hotel info on the receipt with a note. "If you want to talk, I'm here. Marcus." I handed it to the hostess, a young woman with braids, and said, "Make sure Nora gets this, okay?" She nodded, curious but discreet, and I stepped back into the rain-soaked city, my coat heavy, my mind a mess. I didn't know if she'd call, didn't know if she'd even remember me, but I had to try. I'd spent 20 years running from her, and I was done. Back at my penthouse, I called Malik Hayes, my assistant and the closest thing I had to a brother. He was in his South Side apartment, the sound of Coltrane faint in the background. "Yo, Marcus, you good?" he asked, his voice warm but sharp. "You bailed on that investor dinner. Keisha's pissed." "I found her," I said, pacing the marble floor, the city lights glittering outside like a lie. "Zora. She's working at a diner, Malik. Calls herself Nora. Doesn't know who I am." The line went quiet, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. "Damn," he said finally, his voice heavy. "That's heavy, man. You sure it's her?" "I'd know her anywhere," I said, my throat tight, the sapphire ring burning a hole in my pocket. "But she looked at me like I was nobody, and I think Lila did more than just pressure me to leave her." Malik sighed, the kind that carried years of watching me wrestle my demons. "You sure you're doing this for her or for you?" he asked, his locks rustling as he leaned back. "What if she's happy, Marcus? What if Nora's who she wants to be?" "Then I'll love whoever she is now," I said. But the words felt fragile, like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "But she deserves to know the truth. About us. About what my family did." "Truth's a heavy thing," Malik said, his voice gentle but firm. "You go digging. You better be ready for what you find, and don't expect her to thank you for it." We hung up, and I stood by the window, Lake Michigan, a dark mirror below. Malik was right. I was on shaky ground, chasing a woman who might not want to be found. But I couldn't walk away, not when Zora was so close, not when her eyes still held that sunset glow, even if they didn't see me yet. The next day, I went back to Soul Haven, my excuse a late lunch. But really, I needed to see her again. She was behind the counter, laughing with a coworker, a woman named Tanya, her voice bright but edged with fatigue. I slid into my booth, and when she came to take my order, I caught a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, like she'd seen my note but wasn't sure what to make of it. "Back already?" she asked, her tone teasing but guarded. "Couldn't stay away," I said, my voice lighter than I felt, my eyes locked on hers. "This place has the best cornbread in Chicago." She smirked, jotting down my order. "Flattery won't get you a discount, Mr. Fancy Suit," she said. But there was a warmth in her voice, a crack in the wall she'd built. I watched her walk away, her red apron swaying, and felt a spark of hope, small but stubborn. That night, I got a call from my mom, Lila, her voice all honey and steel. "Marcus, darling," she said, the sound of a gala in the background. "You've been distracted lately. I need you at the Langston Foundation event next week. There's a young woman I'd like you to meet. Perfect for you, from the right kind of family." I gripped the phone, my jaw tight, remembering the way she'd looked at Zora, her smile a mask for disdain. "I'm not interested, Mom," I said, my voice cold. "And I'm starting to wonder what else you kept from me back then. About Zora." She laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Don't dig up old mistakes, Marcus. You're a Caldwell now. Act like it." She hung up, but her words lingered, a warning that felt like a confession. I stood in my penthouse, the city lights blurring, and knew she was hiding something that had kept Zora from me all those years ago. I hired a private investigator the next morning, a guy named Carter who'd worked for me on corporate deals. "Find out what my family did 20 years ago," I told him, handing over a photo of Zora from college, her smile wide, her curls a halo. Letters, calls, anything they blocked. "And dig into Zora Mitchell, working at Soul Haven. I need to know her story." Carter nodded, his eyes sharp. "This personal, Mr. Caldwell?" "More than you'll ever know," I said, my voice low. He left, and I went to my office, the tower's glass walls closing in. I buried myself in work, contracts, calls, a board meeting. But every quiet moment, my mind went back to her, to the diner, to the way her hand had brushed the table, to the scar that tied her to a past I'd burned down. I didn't know if she'd call, didn't know if she'd ever see me as more than a stranger in a suit. But I'd seen her again, and that was enough to keep me fighting, even if it meant facing my family's lies and the truth I'd been too scared to chase. The Chicago skyline glittered outside my penthouse window, a mosaic of light that should have felt like triumph. But tonight, it just mocked me. I stood there, the sapphire ring in my pocket a constant weight, its edges digging into my thigh like a reminder of every choice I'd made wrong. Zora Mitchell was out there, pouring coffee at Soul Haven, calling herself Nora, living a life I'd had no part in building. And my mother, Lila, with her honeyed voice and steel heart, was hiding something that had kept Zora from me 20 years ago. I could feel it, like a storm brewing just out of sight. The past week had been a tightrope walk. I'd gone back to Soul Haven every evening, my excuse a plate of catfish or a slice of peach cobbler. But really, I was chasing glimpses of her. Zora's smile, her laugh, the way her eyes held a sunset I'd never stopped loving. She was polite, maybe a little curious, but there was no recognition, no spark of the girl who danced with me under Bronzeville's neon lights. Carter, my private investigator, had confirmed the basics. Zora had built a life from scratch after college, raising a daughter, Nia, on her own, working her way through night school for an MBA. But the why, how she'd ended up in that diner, what my family had done to bury her, remained a shadow I couldn't pin down. I'd left my hotel info with her a week ago, a desperate move, and she hadn't called. Part of me wondered if Malik was right, if I was chasing a ghost, a memory of a love that didn't exist anymore. But then I'd see her, humming Billie Holiday as she wiped down tables, her curls catching the diner's warm light, and I'd know. She was still Zora, still the woman who'd made me believe I could be more than my last name. I just didn't know how to reach her without breaking the life she'd built. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my spiral. It was Malik Hayes, my assistant and best friend, his voice cutting through the haze. "Yo, Marcus, you still with us?" he asked, the sound of a basketball game faint in the background. "You've been MIA all week, man. Keisha's about to stage a coup." I laughed, but it sounded hollow, even to me. "I'm in deep, Malik," I said, sinking onto the leather couch, the city lights casting shadows across the room. "Zora's out there, living like I never existed, and I think I think she did more than just talk me into leaving her." Malik's sigh was heavy, the kind that carried years of watching me wrestle with my family's weight. "You sure this is about her, or about you fixing what you broke?" he asked, his locks rustling as he shifted. "What if she's good, Marcus? What if Nora's who she's supposed to be?" "She deserves to know who she was," I said, my voice low, the ring burning in my pocket, "even if it means she walks away from me again." "Just be careful, Eight," Malik said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're not just digging up your past, you're digging up hers too. That's a lot to carry." We hung up, and I sat there, the sapphire ring glinting in my hand. Malik was right. I was on dangerous ground, stirring up a history that might hurt her more than it healed. But I couldn't stop, not when I was this close, not when her eyes still held that fire, even if it was buried under years of struggle. The next evening I was back at Soul Haven, the diner's neon sign a beacon in the dusk. The place was busier tonight, a mix of regulars and after-work crowd, the jukebox playing a low Nina Simone track. Zora was behind the counter, laughing with Tanya Brooks, her co-worker, a woman with gray braids and a no-nonsense vibe. I slid into my usual booth, my heart kicking up when Zora glanced my way, her eyes narrowing slightly, like she was trying to place me. She came over, her red apron tied tight, a notepad in hand. "You're making this place your second home, Mr. Fancy Suit," she said, her tone teasing but guarded, her pen poised. "Catfish again, or are you feeling adventurous?" "Call me Marcus," I said, leaning forward, my eyes locked on hers. "And yeah, catfish is fine. But I'm more interested in you, Nora. What's your story?" Her smile faltered just for a second, and I saw a crack in her armor. Curiosity, maybe fear. "Not much to tell," she said, her voice softer now, her Memphis lilt slipping through. "Just a mom, working, trying to keep the lights on. You don't need to play detective." "Maybe I want to," I said, keeping my tone light, but my heart was racing. "You seem like someone with a hell of a story." She smirked, jotting down my order. "Flattery's cheap, Marcus," she said, but there was a warmth in her eyes, a flicker of something that made me hope. She walked away, her curls bouncing, and I watched her, my mind replaying our college nights, her hand in mine, her laugh warm against my skin, the way she'd call me out for dodging the truth. Tanya came by a minute later, refilling my coffee, her eyes sharp. "You got a thing for my girl, don't you?" she asked, her voice low, a mix of amusement and warning. "She's tough, but she's been through enough. Don't go stirring up trouble unless you mean it." "I mean it," I said, meeting her gaze, my voice steady. "More than you know." Tanya nodded, like she was sizing me up, and moved on. But her words stuck, a reminder that Zora wasn't just my lost love. She was a woman with a life, a daughter, a world I'd had no part in. I thought about the crash that had ended our story, the night I'd walked away by Lake Michigan, my family's ultimatum ringing in my ears. Lila had called Zora a distraction, her voice cold, but I was starting to wonder if she'd done more than talk. If she'd buried Zora's attempts to reach me, kept us apart to protect the Caldwell name. The door jingled, and a girl walked in, 19 maybe, with Zora's curls and a fierce, protective energy. She hugged Zora, calling her mom, and I knew instantly, Nia, Zora's daughter. My heart sank, a mix of awe and guilt. Zora had raised a kid on her own, while I'd been building skyscrapers and dodging my mom's matchmaking. Nia glanced my way, her eyes narrowing, and I felt like she could see every mistake I'd ever made. "Mom, who's the suit?" Nia asked, her voice low but sharp, as Zora poured her a soda. "He's been here every night. Some kind of creep?" Zora laughed, but it was tight, her eyes flicking to me. "Just a customer, Nia," she said, her tone careful. "Likes his catfish too much." Nia didn't buy it, her gaze cutting through me like a blade. She sat at the counter, watching me, and I knew I'd have to earn her trust if I wanted any chance with Zora. I finished my meal, left another big tip, and stepped outside, the city air cool against my skin. I was about to head back to the hotel when my phone rang. Darius Reed, an old college friend, now a teacher in Chicago. "Marcus, you stirring up old ghosts?" Darius asked, his voice warm but wary. "Heard you've been sniffing around Zora Mitchell." "How'd you know?" I asked, leaning against a street lamp, the city buzzing around me. Word travels, he said, chuckling. But listen, man, there's something you need to know. After you left Zora, she wrote you a letter. Said she was pregnant, needed to talk, never heard back. I figured you ghosted her, but now, I'm not so sure. My stomach dropped, the world tilting. A letter? I said, my voice hoarse. I never got it, Darius. You think my mom got to it? Darius was quiet, then said, Wouldn't put it past Lila. She was hell-bent on keeping you in line. Dig into it, Marcus, but be ready for what you find. I hung up, my hands shaking, the sapphire ring heavy in my pocket. Lila had always been controlling, but this was betrayal, a knife in the heart. I thought of Zora, pregnant, alone, reaching out to me, and getting nothing but silence. I wanted to call Lila, demand answers, but I knew she'd dodge, her smile a mask for lies. Instead, I walked back to Soul Haven, my excuse a forgotten jacket, but really, I needed to see Zora, to know she was okay. She was wiping down the counter, the diner nearly empty, Tanya counting tips in the back. Forget something? She asked, her voice teasing, but her eyes were tired, like she was carrying more than just the day's work. Yeah, I said, stepping closer, the jukebox playing a low Aretha Franklin track. You. I know you don't remember me, Nora, but I remember you, and I think you feel it too. Her hand paused on the rag, her eyes searching mine, and for a moment I saw it. A crack, a flicker of the girl who'd loved me. Your trouble, Marcus, she said, her voice soft, her Memphis lilt slipping through. I don't have room for trouble. Maybe I'm the good kind, I said, my heart pounding, my hand itching to reach for hers. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away, and that was enough to keep me going. I left the diner, the city lights blurring, and headed to a bar where I knew Darius hung out. He was there, grating papers over a beer, his dreads pulled back. You look like hell, he said, sliding me a drink. What's the plan, man? You gonna tell her? I don't know, I admitted, the beer cold against my palm. If Lila blocked that letter, it changes everything. Zora deserves the truth, but what if it hurts her more than it helps? Darius leaned back, his eyes sharp. Truth ain't always a gift, he said, but lies are worse. You owe her that much, Marcus. Just don't expect her to run back to you. I nodded, the weight of his words settling in. Zora was out there, carrying dreams and scars I'd had no part in, and I was here, holding a ring and a past that might break her all over again. I stood by Lake Michigan that night, the wind sharp, the sapphire ring glinting in my hand. I'd hurt her once, walked away when she needed me most, but I wasn't that kid anymore, and I'd fight to prove it, even if it meant facing my family's sins and the daughter who looked at me like I was the enemy. The Hyde Park bookstore was a sanctuary, its shelves a fortress of stories that had kept me sane through years of struggle. Tonight, though, it felt like a battlefield, the rain hammering the windows, the air thick with something I couldn't name. I stood by a rack of novels, my fingers lingering on a Toni Morrison paperback, my heart racing for reasons I didn't understand. Marcus Caldwell was here, his presence like a melody I'd forgotten but couldn't stop humming. He'd been showing up at Soul Haven for weeks, his eyes searching mine, his voice stirring something deep, something dangerous. I told myself he was just a customer, a rich guy with too much time, but the way he said my name, Zora, not Nora, made me question everything. Find anything good? He asked, stepping closer, his voice low and warm, like a jazz bass line that vibrated in my chest. I turned, and his eyes hit me like a spotlight, dark, intense, holding secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. He was different from the boy I'd dreamed about lately, the one who danced with me under rain-soaked lights. But those eyes, they were the same, pulling me in like a tide. "Maybe," I said, holding up the book, my voice steadier than I felt. "Depends on what I'm looking for." He moved closer, the space between us shrinking, the storm outside a wild drumbeat. "What are you looking for, Zora?" he asked, his voice rough, my name a spark that lit up the dark corners of my mind. I froze, my breath catching, a memory flickering. Rain, a lake, a hand in mine. The lights flickered, the storm messing with the power, and the bookstore dimmed, the jazz radio fading to static. We were alone, the clerk gone, the world held at bay. He reached for the Langston Hughes book on the shelf, his fingers brushing mine, and the touch was electric, a jolt that made my pulse race. His hand lingered, his thumb grazing my wrist, the scar there a ghost of a life I couldn't remember. "Marcus?" I whispered, his name slipping out like a truth I didn't know I held. My eyes searched his, confusion and want swirling, and I saw it, a hunger, a pain, a love that felt like mine. "You feel it, don't you?" he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Us, what we were." My lips parted, my heart a storm of fear and longing. He stepped closer, his hand finding my shoulder, his thumb tracing the skin above my collarbone, sending a shiver down my spine. I should have pulled away, should have run, but my body leaned into his, drawn by a gravity I couldn't fight. His forehead nearly touched mine, his breath warm, the scent of his cologne mingling with the bookstore's aged paper. And then we kissed, slow at first, like a question, then deep, desperate, a fire that burned through 20 years of silence. His lips were soft, tasting of mint and regret, and I melted into him, my hands gripping his shirt, a soft moan escaping as his fingers tangled in my curls. It was like coming home, like remembering a song I'd sung in another life. But thunder crashed, shaking the walls, and I pulled back, gasping, my eyes wide with panic. "I can't," I said, my voice trembling, my hands pushing against his chest. "I don't know what this is, Marcus, but I can't." I grabbed my book, my red scarf trailing, and ran into the rain, my heart a wreck, my lips still burning. I didn't know who he was, not really, but he'd cracked something open inside me, and I was terrified of what it might mean. Back at my apartment, I stood by the window, the Chicago skyline a blur through the rain, my journal open on the table. I'd been dreaming for weeks, rain-soaked nights, jazz clubs, a man who held me like I was his world. Marcus's face kept slipping into those dreams, his voice calling me Zora, not Nora, the name I'd used since I rebuilt my life after college. I wrote it down, my hand shaking. Who is he? Why does he feel like home? I thought of Nia, my daughter, asleep in her room, her fierce heart my anchor. I'd fought for her, for us, through every rejection, every late-night shift, every dream I'd buried to keep her safe. I couldn't let a stranger, no matter how familiar, unravel that. Marcus's words echoed. "You feel it, don't you?" I did, and it scared me. I'd built a life on steady ground, Soul Haven, my community work, Nia's scholarship to Northwestern. But his eyes, his touch, were pulling me toward a past I couldn't see, a love I wasn't sure I could trust. I closed the journal, my fingers tracing the scar on my wrist, a mark from a fall I barely remembered, and wondered if I was strong enough to face whatever truth he carried. The next day, I was back at Soul Haven, the diner's neon glow a comfort, the jukebox playing a low Mahalia Jackson track. Tanya Brooks, my co-worker and confidant, was wiping down the counter, her gray braids tucked under a headscarf. "Your boy was here again last night," she said, her eyes sharp but warm. Left another big tip. You gonna tell me what's up with Mr. Fancy Suit, or do I gotta play detective? I laughed, tying my red apron, but my stomach twisted. Nothing's up, Tanya, I said, keeping my voice light. Just a guy who likes catfish too much. Mm-hmm, she said, smirking. Those eyes of his say different, girl. He's looking at you like you're the whole damn menu. I shook my head, but her words stuck. A reminder of the kiss, the way Marcus's hands had felt, steady but hungry. I was pouring coffee for a regular when Nia walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her curls a mirror of mine. She hugged me, her eyes scanning the diner, and I knew she was looking for him. Mom, that guy's trouble, she said, sliding onto a stool, her voice low but fierce. I saw him staring at you last night. What's his deal? He's just a customer, baby, I said, but my voice wavered, and Nia's eyes narrowed, her protective streak flaring. Don't worry about him. You got enough on your plate with school. She didn't push, but I knew she wasn't convinced. Nia was my heart, my reason, a pre-med student who'd earned her way to Northwestern with grit and brains. I'd raised her alone, through late shifts and empty bank accounts, and I'd be damned if I let anyone, especially Marcus, upset her world. That night, Marcus came back, his suit crisp but his eyes tired, like he hadn't slept. He slid into his booth, and when I brought his coffee, he leaned forward, his voice low. I know I'm pushing, Zora, he said, his eyes locked on mine, but I need you to know. You're not just Nora to me. You're someone I lost a long time ago. My hand trembled, the coffee pot heavy. You don't know me, I said, my voice sharp, but my heart was racing, his words echoing the dreams I couldn't shake. Stop acting like you do. I'm trying to, he said, his voice rough, his hand reaching for mine but stopping short. Just meet me tomorrow, after your shift. The park by the lake. Give me a chance to explain. I should have said no, should have walked away, but his eyes held me, and I nodded, my throat tight. One chance, I said, and left, my heart a tangle of fear and hope. The next morning, I got a call from Darius Reed, an old college friend I hadn't seen in years. He was a teacher now, his voice warm but heavy. Zora, you okay? He asked, cutting through the small talk. Marcus Caldwell's been asking about you. Says he found you at Soul Haven. Marcus? I said, my stomach dropping, the name a key to a lock I couldn't open. What's he want with me, Darius? He hesitated, then said, He's digging into the past, Zora. Back in college, after he left you, you wrote him a letter, said you were pregnant. He swears he never got it. I think his mom, Lila, made sure of it. The world tilted, my breath catching. Pregnant? I whispered, my hand flying to my chest, Nia's face flashing in my mind. I'd been alone, scared, reaching out to the boy I'd loved, and gotten nothing. You're saying his family, they kept him from me. I'm saying Lila's got a history of pulling strings, Darius said, his voice low. Marcus is looking for answers, but you need to decide what you want, Zora. He's not the kid you knew, but neither are you. I hung up, my hands shaking, the diner's hum fading. I thought of Nia, of the life I'd built, of the dreams that haunted me, rain, jazz, a love I'd lost. Marcus was tearing it all open, and I didn't know if I could face it. But Darius's words burned, a truth I couldn't ignore. If Lila had stolen my chance to reach him, if she'd buried my letter, then Marcus wasn't the only one who'd been betrayed. That afternoon, I went to the park, the lakefront breeze sharp, my red scarf tied tight. Marcus was waiting, his coat open, his eyes searching mine. "You came," he said, his voice thick with relief, his hand twitching like he wanted to reach for me. "I'm here," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. "But I need answers, Marcus. Why do you keep calling me Zora? What do you know about me that I don't?" He stepped closer, the wind whipping between us, and his eyes held a pain I couldn't name. "I know you're the woman I loved," he said, his voice breaking. "The woman I lost because I was too weak to fight for us. And I think my family made sure you couldn't fight for me either." Shh. I stood there, the lake glittering behind him, and felt the crack in my heart widen, a truth I wasn't ready to face. I'd spent 20 years building walls, but Marcus was tearing them down, and I didn't know if I'd survive the fall. The Chicago night was alive with a restless energy, the city lights flickering like a heartbeat against the dark. I stood outside Zora Mitchell's apartment building, a modest brick walk-up in Englewood, my palms sweaty despite the cool breeze. The sapphire ring in my pocket felt like a live wire, its weight a reminder of the tightrope I was walking. Zora had invited me to dinner, a step I hadn't dared hope for after that kiss in the bookstore. But the air between us was thick with unspoken questions. She was starting to remember, me, us, the love we'd lost. But the truth about my family's betrayal, about the letter Lila had buried, was a bomb waiting to go off. I'd spent 20 years building an empire, but tonight I was just Marcus, a man begging for a second chance with the woman who'd always been my home. I knocked, my heart pounding, and Zora opened the door, her curls loose, her red scarf draped over a chair. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, but she was radiant, her amber-flecked eyes catching the light from a lamp inside. "You're punctual," she said, her voice teasing but guarded, a smile flickering. "Come on in. Hope you like collards." "Love 'em," I said, stepping inside, the air warm with the scent of cornbread and greens, a Mahalia Jackson record spinning low on a turntable. The apartment was small but alive, bookshelves crammed with novels and poetry, Nia's artwork on the walls, a tiny balcony blooming with plants. It was a real home, not like my sterile penthouse, and it hit me hard. Zora had built this without me, through years I'd missed. Nia was there, setting the table, her eyes sharp as she sized me up. At 19, she was Zora's mirror. Same curls, same fire, but with a protective edge that cut through me. "So you're the guy who likes Mom's catfish too much," she said, her voice dry, her arms crossed. "What's your deal, Marcus?" "Nia," Zora warned, but her eyes were on me, curious, like she wanted my answer as much as her daughter did. I met Nia's gaze, my voice steady. "I'm someone who knew your mom a long time ago," I said. "Someone who's trying to make things right." Nia's jaw tightened, but she didn't push, just nodded and went back to the table. I felt her watching me, a guard dog ready to pounce if I stepped out of line. Dinner was a dance of tension and warmth. Zora's collards were perfect, the cornbread buttery, the conversation light but laced with undercurrents. We talked about Nia's pre-med classes at Northwestern, Zora's community work teaching kids about Black history, my company's latest deal, but every glance between me and Zora was charged, her eyes searching mine, her hand brushing the scar on her wrist like it held answers she couldn't find. Then my phone buzzed, Lila's name flashing on the screen. I silenced it, but Zora saw, her smile fading. "Your mom?" she asked, her voice quiet but sharp, like she'd caught a scent of danger. "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "She's been persistent lately." Nia snorted, stabbing her collards. "Sounds like trouble," she said, her eyes flicking to her mom. "You sure about this guy, Mom?" Zora didn't answer, but her silence was loud, her eyes locked on me like she was waiting for me to prove something. The phone buzzed again, and I cursed under my breath, stepping onto the balcony to take it. Lila's voice was all honey and steel, the kind she used to bend people to her will. "Marcus, you're ignoring me," she said, a Gala's chatter in the background. "This nonsense with that waitress needs to stop. You're a Caldwell. Act like it." "Her name's Zora," I snapped, my voice low, the city sprawling below. "And I know about the letter, Mom. The one you buried. You kept her from me." Lila laughed, sharp and cold. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "I protected you, Marcus. She was a distraction, pregnant with who knows whose child. You're better than that." My hand clenched the railing, rage boiling in my chest. "You had no right," I said, my voice shaking. "You stole 20 years from us. I'm done with your games." I hung up, my heart pounding, and turned to find Zora in the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes wide with shock. "You heard that?" I asked, my voice rough, stepping toward her. "Enough," she said, her voice trembling, her curls catching the balcony's dim light. "You knew I was pregnant? And your mom? She kept us apart?" I nodded, my throat tight, the truth a weight I couldn't carry alone anymore. "Darius told me about the letter," I said, my hands shaking. "You wrote to me, Zora, after I left. Said you were pregnant. I never got it. Lila made sure of it." Her hand flew to her mouth, tears glinting in her eyes, and for a moment I thought she'd collapse. "I was alone," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Scared, broke, trying to keep Nia alive. And you were gone." "I didn't know," I said, stepping closer, my voice raw. "I swear, Zora, I didn't know. If I had, I'd have fought for you, for us." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, and turned away, her shoulders trembling. Nia appeared, her eyes blazing, and shoved past me to hug her mom. "Get out," Nia said, her voice low but fierce. "You're hurting her." I wanted to argue, to beg, but Zora's pain was a wall I couldn't climb. I left, the door closing behind me, the city's hum swallowing my steps. Back at my penthouse, I stood by the window, Lake Michigan, a dark mirror, and felt the weight of Lila's betrayal crash over me. She hadn't just pressured me to leave Zora. She'd erased her, buried a letter that could have changed everything. I thought of Zora, pregnant, alone, fighting for Nia while I built skyscrapers on the ashes of our love. The sapphire ring burned in my pocket, a promise I'd failed to keep. The next day, I called Tanya Brooks, Zora's co-worker, needing to know she was okay. Tanya's voice was sharp but kind, her gray braids rustling as she spoke. "She's a mess, Marcus," she said, the diner's clatter in the background. "That letter thing hit her hard. She's been writing in her journal, talking about dreams, jazz clubs, rain, you. Give her space, but don't give up. She's stronger than you know." I nodded, my throat tight, and hung up, my mind racing. I met Darius Reed at his school, a low brick building in Bronzeville, his classroom filled with posters of Maya Angelou and Malcolm X. "You told her about the letter?" he asked, grading papers, his dreads pulled back. "Yeah," I said, sinking into a chair, the weight of it all crushing me. "She hates me, Darius. And Nia. She's ready to bury me." Darius leaned back, his eyes sharp. "Zora don't hate you," he said. "She's scared. That letter's proof her life could have been different, and Nia's just protecting her. You want to fix this, you gotta show up, not just talk." I left, his words echoing, and went to Soul Haven, my excuse a coffee order, but really, I needed to see her. Zora was behind the counter, her eyes tired, but her back straight, her red apron a quiet rebellion. I slid into a booth, and when she brought my coffee, I leaned forward, my voice low. "I'm sorry," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "For what Lila did, for what I didn't do. I'm here, Zora, for as long as you'll let me." She didn't answer, but her hand lingered on the table, her fingers inches from mine, and I saw it, a crack, a spark of the woman who'd loved me. "I need time," she said, her voice soft, her Memphis lilt slipping through. "But don't stop coming back." That night, I invited her to dinner, just the two of us at her place, to talk, to heal. She agreed, and as we stood on her balcony after Nia went to bed, the city lights glinting below, I told her everything. The letter, Lila's lies, the love I'd never stopped carrying. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't pull away, her hand finding mine, her scar warm under my thumb. "I was so angry," she said, her voice breaking, her curls brushing my shoulder. "Not just at you, but at the world that made me feel small. But you saw me, Marcus, even when I couldn't see myself." I cupped her face, my thumb tracing her cheek, and kissed her. Slow, deep, a fire that burned through every regret. Her lips were soft, tasting of wine and salt, and she leaned into me, her hands gripping my shirt, her breath quickening. My fingers slid to her waist, pulling her close, the warmth of her body a home I'd lost. She moaned softly, her curls tangling in my hands, and for a moment the world was just us, two souls finding each other in the dark. But she pulled back, her eyes shining, her voice firm. "I need to do this for me," she said, her hand on my chest. "I'm opening a cafe, Second Chances, for kids like Nia, for people like me. I can't lose myself again, Marcus, not even for you." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride, not pain. "I'll wait," I said, my voice rough. "For you, for us, for whatever you need." She smiled, small but real, and I knew this wasn't the end, but a beginning. The next day, she met with a community group to plan Second Chances, her eyes bright with purpose. I watched from a distance, my heart full, knowing she was building something bigger than us. But Lila's shadow still loomed, and I knew the truth wasn't done with us yet. The Chicago evening was alive with promise, the lakefront breeze carrying the scent of summer grass and possibility. I stood outside Second Chances, Zora's cafe, its neon sign glowing warm against the dusk, the windows spilling light onto the Englewood street. Inside, the place buzzed. Laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of a jazz trio playing Ella Fitzgerald in the corner. Zora had done it, turned her dream into reality. A cafe that doubled as a scholarship hub for first-generation kids like her daughter Nia. I watched her through the window, her curls loose, her red scarf tied loosely around her neck, her smile brighter than the city skyline. She was Zora Mitchell, not Nora, not the waitress I'd found at Soul Haven, but the woman who'd rebuilt herself from ashes and made me believe in second chances. It had been a year since that night on her balcony, when her lips had met mine, a kiss that burned through 20 years of regret. A year since she'd told me she needed to do this for herself, to open second chances without leaning on me or anyone else. I'd honored her space, stepping back but never leaving, supporting from the shadows through Tanya Brooks, who funneled my donations to the cafe's startup without Zora knowing. Lila, my mother, had faded into silence, her calls unanswered, her influence cut off like a weed. Caldwell Ventures was thriving, restructured to prioritize ethical investments, a legacy I was building for myself, not her. But none of it mattered as much as this moment, watching Zora shine, knowing I'd earned a place in her world. The cafe's grand opening was a celebration of everything she was. The walls were lined with books, Hurston, Morrison, Baldwin, shelves she'd curated to inspire the kids who'd come here for tutoring and hope. Tables were packed with community folks, single parents she'd hired, students she'd mentored, and Nia, home from Northwestern, beaming by her side. I stood at the back, my heart full, my suit feeling out of place among the jeans and dashikis, but Zora's smile when she saw me made it all fade away. She stepped to the front, a microphone in hand, her voice steady but warm, like a melody that held everyone captive. "Second Chances isn't just a cafe," she said, her eyes sweeping the room, her curls catching the light. "It's a promise, to kids like I was, to families like mine, that your dreams matter, no matter where you start. This is for my mom, who worked doubles to get me here, for my daughter Nia, who's my heart, and for everyone who's ever been told they're not enough." The room erupted in applause, and I clapped too, my throat tight, pride swelling in my chest. Nia hugged her, whispering something that made Zora laugh, and Tanya, behind the counter, raised a glass of sweet tea, her gray braids swaying. I caught Nia's eye, and she nodded, a small gesture, but it meant the world. She'd gone from wanting to bury me to calling me for advice on a business class project, a slow thaw that felt like a miracle. After the speeches, Zora found me, her eyes shining, her red scarf a bright slash against her dress. "Not bad for a waitress, huh?" she said, linking her arm through mine, her voice teasing but proud. "Not bad for a queen," I said, my voice low, my hand brushing hers, the scar on her wrist a reminder of the road we'd traveled. She laughed, the sound warm, and led me outside, where the lakefront park stretched toward the water, its paths lit by soft lamps. We walked, the jazz fading behind us, the city's hum a quiet backdrop. "You didn't have to stay in the shadows," she said, stopping by a bench, her eyes searching mine. "Tanya told me about the money, Marcus. You didn't take credit, didn't ask for anything. Why?" "Because it's your dream," I said, my voice rough, stepping closer. "I didn't want to take that from you. I just wanted to be part of it, however you'd let me." Her breath caught and she reached for my hand, her fingers lacing through mine, her warmth grounding me. "You've changed," she said, her voice soft, her Memphis lilt slipping through. "The boy I loved, he was scared, torn. You're not him anymore." "I had to grow up," I said, my thumb grazing her wrist, the sapphire ring heavy in my pocket. "You showed me what it means to fight for something real, Zora, even when I was too weak to see it." She smiled, tears glinting, and leaned into me, her head resting against my chest, her breath steady against my heart. The park was quiet, the lake shimmering under the moon, and for a moment it was just us, two people who'd found each other after a lifetime apart. I thought of the letter Lila had buried, the years we'd lost, the pain Zora had carried alone. I'd spent a year proving I wasn't that boy anymore, showing up at Soul Haven, helping with the cafe's permits, earning Nia's grudging respect, and Zora, she'd fought her own battles, reclaiming her name, her fire, her truth. We walked to the lake's edge where the water lapped gently, the city lights a distant glow. I pulled the sapphire ring from my pocket, its blue stone catching the moonlight, and knelt, my heart a drum in my chest. "Zora Mitchell," I said, my voice steady despite the tears burning my eyes. "I loved you then, and I love you now, not for who we were, but for who we've become. You're my home, my heart, my everything. Will you marry me, not to go back, but to build something new?" She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking, and I slipped the ring on her finger, its weight a promise we'd both keep. She pulled me up, her arms wrapping around me, and we kissed, slow, deep, a dance of lips and breath that tasted of sweet tea and forever. Her curls tangled in my fingers, her body warm against mine, and I felt her smile against my mouth, a spark that lit up every shadow. My hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer, her breath quickening, a soft sigh escaping as we stood there, wrapped in each other, the lake a silent witness. The next week, Tanya threw a dinner at her place, a South Side bungalow filled with laughter, jazz on the radio, and plates of fried chicken, collards, and cornbread. Nia was there, home for the weekend, her smile bright as she toasted her mom. "To Mom," she said, her voice thick, "who taught me what it means to be unstoppable. And to Marcus, you're not half bad." Everyone laughed, and Zora squeezed my hand under the table, her ring glinting, her eyes shining with love. Tanya raised her glass, her braids swaying. "To second chances," she said, "and to love that don't quit no matter how long the road." I looked at Zora, her red scarf bright against her curls, and knew they were right. Our love wasn't a fairy tale. It was hard-won, rooted in respect, in seeing each other's truest selves. I'd seen Zora, not as a waitress or a memory, but as a woman with fire and heart, who'd rebuilt her life from nothing. And she'd seen me, not as a billionaire or a coward, but as Marcus, a man who'd fought to be worthy of her. Life moved forward, a rhythm we were learning together. Zora ran second chances, hiring single parents, mentoring kids, her voice unapologetic as she taught them about Langston Hughes and Audre Lorde. I supported her, funding scholarships through Caldwell Ventures, but it was hers, a testament to her strength. We planned a small wedding, just family and friends, with Nia giving Zora away and Malik as my best man. His locks pulled back, his grin wide. "You did it, man," he said, clapping my shoulder. "You let her shine and she chose you. That's the real deal." Darius Reed came too, his dreads graying, his eyes warm. "You two were always a force," he said, raising a glass. "Took you long enough to figure it out." Looking back, I realized how much we'd both needed to be seen. I'd hidden behind wealth and walls, afraid to let anyone close, afraid I'd lose them like I'd lost Zora. She'd hidden behind Nora, behind a borrowed name and a life of survival, afraid to be too much, too black, too broken. But together, we'd found something rare. A love that didn't demand we change, that lifted us higher because of who we were. I learned that love isn't always a grand gesture. Sometimes it's a plate of cornbread shared in a diner, a hand held in a storm, a quiet wait through a year of growth. Sometimes it's letting someone walk their path, trusting they'll find their way back. Zora was my path, my legacy, the song I'd sing until my last breath, and I'd spend every day making sure she knew it, not with money or power, but with the quiet, steady work of showing up, of seeing her, of loving her as she was. So, if you're out there, feeling lost or unseen, carrying a regret that weighs you down, keep going. Your heart, your truth, your fire, they matter. And if you're holding space for someone, waiting for them to shine, know that they'll see you one day, in the moments when the world falls away. The strongest love stories start where you least expect them. In a diner, by a lake, in the courage to try again. If Marcus and Zora's story made you believe in love that fights through time, or reminded you of someone who saw your true self, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment about a time you got a second chance at love or chased a dream against the odds. Your stories are what keep this journey alive, and I can't wait to read them. Let's keep the love and the fire burning, because you never know who's waiting to feel found.